Are we live? I think that we are live. Hello, everybody. Josh here for another episode of the Visto Show. It is July the 20th. Boy, does summer ever fly by. July the 20th, 2023. How the heck are you? Thanks for tuning in. If you are tuning in live with us on LinkedIn, then number one, thank you. And number two, if you could just leave a quick comment. Can you hear me? Can you see me okay? Some of this LinkedIn live stuff can be very hit or miss. So I always like to do that quick check-in just to make sure. If you're watching after the fact on YouTube, what are you waiting for? You're missing me live on LinkedIn, where you can actually take part in the conversation, right? Because as most of you know now, when I go live, usually every second Friday, although this week, for a special reason, it's a Thursday. Rohan says, yes, he can hear me. Awesome, Rohan. Thanks for tuning in. How you doing? I've had such a hectic morning that I'm just squeezing in a quick snack, but I just finished. Samir says yes. Rohan says all good sound and video. Awesome. If you are watching after the fact on YouTube, make sure to check us out on LinkedIn because it's where I go live, which means you can take part in the conversation, just like Samir, Rohan, Sandeep, and Neil are about to do as well. Sandeep says we can see and hear you, Josh. Awesome. Neil says we hear you. Great whistling. Thank you very much. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. I'm going to jump right into the show because we have lots to discuss today. Oh, crap. I didn't update. You can actually ignore the text on screen because what we're going to do is we're going to talk about Express Entry. I'll leave that in. We're going to talk about other news. And then the other thing that we're going to talk about is the recent H-1B program and results. So I'm just updating the text on the screen now so that nobody is confused. Shweta says, hey Shweta, how are you doing? So what we're going to talk about is really quickly, I usually like to discuss Express Entry pretty much on every episode because every week or two there's been some new craziness happening with the new industry-specific draws. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We'll quickly go through some other IRCC news that has come out in the last 2 weeks. And then I want to talk about the H-1B visa holder program because that's obviously been exciting and in the news of late. As always, if you're tuning in live, if you have any thoughts or questions about the topics that we're talking about, please feel free to chime in the chat. Especially questions, opinions, thoughts on these topics is always helpful. If you need immigration-specific advice, that's not really the purpose of this show. You can send me a message afterwards, and I can send you in the right direction for that. So anyways, let us jump right the heck in. I'm going to share my screen here, and we're going to take a look at let's do an update. Make sure there's no crazy draws since I last even turned this on. There's been a lot of draws lately, right? Just in the month of July, we've had 6 different draws, right? So I think I did my last show on July 7th, where they had just had 1 week with 4 draws. Last week, July 11th and 12th, they did 2 more, right? So there was an all-program draw on July the 11th with a minimum score requirement of 505 and 800 people invited to apply. And then the next day they did the first ever, I believe, I think it was the first ever, French language proficiency draw, inviting 3,800 people to apply. I think that's the biggest industry-specific draw so far. Yeah, so we see, they did a French language proficiency draw that week for 2,300, healthcare for 1,500, STEM for 500, healthcare for 500. So I don't know how or why, but it looks like they're definitely going French heavy with these industry-specific draws. The other interesting thing that I've thought about, and maybe some of you have thought about it as well, is that there's some industries that they haven't done draws for, right? So for example, where's the page I was looking for? Category B here, I think it's this page. So there's 6 different categories, right? French, healthcare, STEM, trades, transport, and agriculture. They've only done draws for French, healthcare, and STEM, right? They still haven't done for trade, transport, and agriculture. I don't really know why. They've now done 2 French draws before doing any of those other ones, right? So we can see 1 French here, 1 French here. There were 2 healthcares and there was a STEM, right? But we've seen no trucking, we've seen no trades, and we've seen no agricultural draws. So I don't really know why. I guess they're just following their budgets and their mandates, whatever they might be. But what I will say is this: Express Entry has certainly got a lot less predictable, number one, right? Because we don't know what the heck's going on here. And number 2 is the all program draws. If you don't fit in to one of those industry specific categories, Express Entry got a whole lot harder, right? I mean, look at this draw. No program specified. They only invited 800 people. Minimum score requirement of 505. That's a pretty high score requirement. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I kind of thought, and let me know if you guys agree or kind of thought differently or didn't think differently. I thought it was going to balance out a little bit more even, right? I thought they were going to continue to do all program draws, a couple thousand people, and then industry specific draws, couple thousand people. But if we look here, since they did that first healthcare draw, so these last 7 draws, they've only made 2 all program draws for a combined 1,500 people, right? Here was an all program draw, here was an all program draw. So combined 1,500 people, minimum score requirement of 505 and 511. So the big takeaways from me at this point for Express Entry is twofold. Number 1, again, it's now a lot harder to predict, right? Because we don't know which industries they're going to be doing the invites for. And number 2, if you don't fall under one of those industry specific categories, I think Express Entry just got much harder for quote unquote the average Joe. Now, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I don't really know. I'm happy to hear thoughts in the comments if anybody has opinions on whether they like which direction Express Entry is going in or they don't. I don't know. I think the good thing about where it's going is that we are targeting the industries that we probably need the most. That seems to be a good thing. On the other hand, the program has become a lot harder to navigate, right? Because there's more to learn about. It's harder to guess what's going to happen. That makes it harder for us immigration lawyers and immigration professionals, consultants to give advice, right? Because we don't know what the heck might be coming in the next week or two. So hopefully over the next few months, they kind of get into more of a groove, get into more of a rhythm that's a little bit predictable so that we can start giving better advice. But for right now, Express Entry, I think, has gotten a little more difficult and a little bit harder to track. But anyways, that's just one man's opinion. So let's keep cruising along here. There's been a couple interesting announcements. Of course, if you do have any thoughts or opinions on Express Entry, please feel free to throw them in the chat. Let's move on. The next thing I wanted to do was just quickly review the news results from IRCC, because there's been a bunch of them in the last week or two. So I'll share my screen again. If you can see here, even in just the last, what is this, 10 days, 12 days, we see, I'm probably not going to click into each one of these. I'll put the link in the chat for anybody who wants to follow along or anybody who might want to look into any of these specific stories. Canada makes it easier for Hong Kongers to stay and work in Canada. So again, some of these programs between two countries that make it a little bit easier. Justin says, agreed on all points, Josh. Awesome. That is good to hear. Justin, thanks for tuning in and hope things are going well on your end. New investment for JVS Toronto to provide pre-arrival services for newcomers. I don't know what you guys think about this. I see like a lot, there seem to be a lot of newcomer like pre-arrival services, and there's a lot of money that goes into them. I wonder how effective they are. I don't know. This is like a genuine question. Of course, my cat is now deciding to play with her toy right as I go live. Why couldn't she do it at any point this morning. Anyways, I don't know too much about this. Curious to hear other people's thoughts, immigration professionals, people who've been through the immigration process. It seems to me like there's a lot of newcomer services receiving a lot of government funding, but I don't know if like how much they're used, right? Like, again, the question always is like, is this the best way to spend our time and money? I don't know. Newcomers obviously need services, right? But I don't know how many of my clients make use of these pre-arrival services or post-arrival services. I have no idea. If anybody could shed light on that, I would love to hear it. Because I see a lot of these programs, they're advertised on like the Toronto subway and stuff like that. I've spoken to a few of them. They're all run by good people. But I'd be curious to know, a little bit more about the effectiveness and if that's the best way to go about things. Anyways, new arrangement expands work opportunities for Canadian and British youth. So again, kind of along the same lines-ish to this, is Canada with, partnerships or joint, kind of affiliation and visa programs, making it easier for, in this case, youth from the UK to come and work in Canada for a little bit. These seem to be pretty good programs that people like, so I don't really have much to say about that. Seems pretty straightforward. Justin says, in 8 years, I've had very few clients use these services. Yeah, I would probably say the same, Justin. Like, I don't know. Is that the best way to use tax dollars? I'm not sure. The only time they've used it is for language training if needed. And I'm not saying that they're not important, but is government-funded agencies that don't seem to be used much the best way to use that funding? I have no idea. Canada launches pathway to reunite families and support Ukrainians. Probably a step in the right direction here, right, as the war continues to go on. So they're kind of expanding the CUAET program. Again, I'm not going to go into detail on each of these just because there's a lot of stories and a lot of details. So I won't go into to full detail. But the link is in the chat if you want to come to this page and click on whatever most interesting. More federal housing support for asylum claimants. With increasing global migration, like many other countries, Canada's experiencing a rise in the number of people claiming asylum. While housing and supports for asylum claimants are the responsibility of provinces and municipalities, the federal government recognizes the need for all levels of government to work together. Okay, again, I'm not going to go into full detail, although housing is obviously a big concern across the board, right, for the entire country and for all types of immigration, refugee, citizenship type stuff. So we'll have to keep a close eye on that. Usually, Justin says, usually most rely on friends, family, local community. Yeah, and Shweta says, yes, mostly people rely on dependent visa. Right, yeah, so it's, who knows? It'll be tough to say in terms of like, again, those kinds of programs and how do you evaluate them. I agree. I think they're important. I think the issue is informing newcomers. Most are not aware of how the support works, whether it's free, if it affects their immigration status. Yeah, that's a great point, Justin, in the sense that I would argue a good percentage of them probably don't even know that those services exist, right? Which is more of like an awareness, I guess, type problem. And then as well, how does it work, right? Can they just walk in? Does it affect anything negatively? I believe it doesn't, right? I think most of them are free and has no effect on their immigration, which is good. So, anyways, true, says Shweta. Okay, so I just wanted to quickly go over that news there. Where I actually wanted to spend the most time is talking about the H-1B program, right? There's been a lot of news about this lately. There's been a lot of updates, headlines, that kind of stuff. And so what I wanted to do is kind of talk about it a little bit, cover the basics, give my opinion, that kind of stuff. So I think I have a few articles opened up here. Exactly. Okay, so let's go back. So just to give a quick backgrounder, as part of the Canadian tech strategy as announced by IRCC a couple weeks ago. One of those parts was a program attracting H-1B holders, right? So basically a program that allows anyone, as we can see here, with a valid H-1B specialty occupations visa living in the U.S. can apply. You can get an open work permit for up to 3 years. You can't get an extension, but you may be able to get one under another. Okay, so it's only for the length of your passport if it's less than 3 years. It will last for 1 year or until we get 10,000 applications, whichever comes first. We'll talk about that in just a minute. Check out the tweets from Mark Holthe about the H-1B program. What a fun rollout. Okay, that's a good, let me, Mark Holthe Twitter. We'll pull that up as well. Really quickly, I mean, I don't know. I guess I've seen this too many times, but was anyone really surprised that the program took 1.5 days to hit the cap? With the reality being that if the portal didn't go down so often, it probably would have hit the cap within like 5-10 hours. This year, very few got H-1B in the USA. Well, Shredder, they're capped, right? I mean, it's a set number every year. I'm not an H-1B expert, right? Because I'm a Canadian immigration lawyer. But from my understanding, there's a cap, right? They pick a number for each year. They do the lottery, and however many people it's capped at, they get invited to apply. So in Canada, I don't know. I honestly, I'm still a little bit confused by the program. I think it's too early to tell if it was a good idea or not for a couple reasons. Number one is if you're trying to attract tech talent, not every H-1B visa holder is a tech worker, from my understanding, right? You could be a doctor, lawyer, I don't know, consultant, a whole bunch of other things, right? That is not necessarily a tech worker. So I'd be curious to know, like, of these 10,000, how many are working in tech, or, what other industries or occupations are they working in? And are those industries and occupations important for Canada, right? Because what if most of them are not, right? What if most of them are, doctors we probably need a lot of. What if most of them are like, whatever, lawyers, right? Certain types of lawyers that we don't need a ton of, right? Do we really need another 5,000 lawyers, right? Probably not. Maybe depending on the type of lawyer, but it can depend. So number one, I thought this was a little bit too broad. Number two is, and again, this is anecdotal from my experience, tech workers who are in the US on H-1Bs are usually pretty happy. Not all of them, right? I don't want to make sweeping generalizations here. But a lot of tech workers who are in the US on H-1Bs are working at pretty good companies and making a lot of money, right? Like a lot of money in US dollars. And so how many of them are actually even going to want to move to Canada, right? Obviously, at least 10,000 of them wanted to apply, right? But you can whip up the documents relatively easily, pay $155 Canadian, and submit the work permit with no intention of ever coming to Canada. Right? Like, why wouldn't you? I understand the flip side is kind of like, oh, the H-1B is kind of like, it's a tough visa to be on. And if you hold certain passports, it can take you 10, 20 years to get a green card in the US. So people are looking for other options. But what if the majority of these 10,000 people are tech workers making $500K USD at US startups, and they have no intention of moving to Canada unless they get fired? You know what I mean? Is that really worth it for the program? I don't know, right? It's still too early to tell. But the reason why it's a concern is I don't know if people fully appreciate the resources and time and money that goes into creating these new programs, right? Like, if you're going to create an entirely new Canadian immigration program, you have to spend, I'm assuming, hundreds of hours of people hours in government thinking up the policy, the rules behind it, et cetera, debating it, getting it passed, getting enough people to put their thumbs up. Then when it's passed, you got to design the program, right? How's it going to work? How many years is it going to be? What are the document requirements going to be? Blah, 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 right? Then you got to launch it. There's got to be a portal. And you got to train IRCC staff to process these visas properly, right? So number one, the portal, as we know, was a complete disaster, which if you're surprised by, you're probably just new to Canadian immigration, because I don't know if the portal's ever really been that reliable on a launch anyways, but that might be a whole other, conversation. But again, think of all the time, energy, and money that went into thinking up, pushing this program through, designing it, finishing up all the details, creating all these web pages and instructions and portals to accept it. And then we have to find out, was it worth all that time, right? What if we took all of that collective time and effort and just brought down the GTS processing times? What's GTS? Global Talent Stream. It's an expedited work permit for tech workers. Why don't we just make that program fast again? You know what I mean? That's kind of what I've been preaching this whole time, right? From the get-go, from the day that they launched this entire tech talent strategy, right? My concern is that it's all a bunch of hype and headlines, but may not actually accomplish the goal that we're looking for here. But again, it's too early to tell, so let's wait and see. Shweta says, yep, right, not only tech workers, there are a lot. What if I've experienced an immigration firm and want to move to Canada? Well, Shweta, you're still going to have to go through the traditional process, right, to find out if you're eligible, which program, which pathway is the best way. Unfortunately, having work experience at an immigration firm doesn't really affect eligibility for any programs, although it might help you navigate the Canadian immigration system a little bit better, right, because you're more familiar with that kind of stuff. But back on the tech stuff, I mean, yeah, I think it's a little early to tell how things are panning out. Oh, I pulled up, so here's an Economic Times, H-1B visa registrations have closed and capped for blah, blah, blah. Oh no, this is an H-1B article. That was stupid. Wall Street Journal, it's paywalled. Okay, let's check out what Mark Holthe had to say. Obviously a pretty well-known Canadian immigration lawyer. H-1B work permit. Okay, so he went live. I truly hope no one missed out on securing one of the 10,000 spots because their rep queued up more people than they could submit ethically in a timely fashion. In our firm, we took one client and I was waiting with them at 3:45 to ensure they didn't miss out. Yeah, so I mean, there's been a whole issue around the portal, right? Because it's capped at 10K. If Canada really wanted to attract and retain these folks, they had better do a better job of rolling out this application process. The only reason it doesn't fill in hours was the portal glitch and the disjointed rollout. Yeah. So, audacious. Canada offers work permits to lure tech workers in the U.S., but will they come and stay, right? So, this is a key question, right? I think I saw this article as well, right? You can create a new program. You can allow 10,000 people to apply. You can approve 10,000 of these applications, but are they actually going to come to Canada? And if they come to Canada, are they going to stay in Canada, right? This is I'm just looking at random comments here. Brian the Iron. If I was settled in the U.S. and someone offered me an opportunity to come north to the land of ever-changing national anthems, I'd laugh in their face. As for free healthcare, I'm into my second year now waiting for a hernia operation with no date in sight. Oh my God, I kind of want to read more of these replies now. Canada's tech wages are among the lowest in the world and America's are the highest. So that's, again, going back to what I said earlier. If you're on an H-1B in the U.S. working for a legit tech company and you're like pretty good at your job, you're making hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars USD. You come to Canada, they're probably cutting your salary in half, if not more, and you're getting paid in Canadian dollars with more expensive housing, right? So again, of these 10,000 people who applied, number one, how many of them are actually tech workers? How many of them are going to get approved? If approved, how many of them are going to come to Canada? Of those that come to Canada, are they just going to work remotely for their U.S. companies, continue to accept their USD salary, never work for a Canadian company, which is the purpose of this program to begin with? And then of the ones that even come to Canada, how many of them are going to stay and settle versus how many are just going to wait, maybe come to Canada, use Canada as a way to get their green card quicker or whatever, and then just go back to the U.S., right? So Justin says, very good question in that article. Interesting read. Told you it was good. Yeah, no, thank you for that recommendation, Justin. I almost want to see if there's anything else that I missed. In this interview, I also stated that the way IRCC rolled out the application process, left a bad taste in the mouth of many H-1Bers. Were you one of them? So again, they roll out this new program. The portal crashes. It delays. It's terrible. And now these 10,000 people have a bad taste in their mouth, right, about having to go through that. I was recently interviewed for this article on the H-1B work permit process. My experience was painful, but my client got in. How many of you simply gave up or missed out because of the glitch at the activity section in the portal? So yeah, it was glitched. It was delayed. The H-1B open work permit process was a great initiative for attracting skilled talent from the U.S., but my goodness, so much needless pain and suffering for the applicant. Hear more in my interviews with the reporters. Yeah, so, again, the problem here being, if you don't roll it out kind of smooth, and maybe what I'll do is I'll link to this. Is this behind a paywall too? Oh, that can't be found. What the heck? Program to attract tech workers from the U.S. hits capacity one day after opening. Applications for the work permits open on Sunday. I mean, there's another question. Why in the world would you open this on a Sunday? Now, all the workers and their respective lawyers and consultants that they're using have to work on a Sunday, right? And I've seen some posts from some colleagues that basically had to work all day, like, it was like a 12-hour or 24-hour workday on Sunday just to get these in, right? The program is a response to massive layoffs in the U.S. tech industry. But I thought if you get laid off, then your H-1B expires anyways. Don't you have to have a valid H-1B to be eligible through this Canadian program? Saw it was an opportunity for Canada when he first announced the program. Like, I don't know. I don't get it. If you want to attract tech talent, why would you try to attract the most talented and highly paid tech workers in the world to try and entice them away from the highest salaries in the world? Elon Musk said, wow, the temporary policy, blah, blah, blah. The more that we can pull from these highly qualified individuals that we know have the work experience, the skill set, the better. As this program develops, it would be great to see it expanded. I don't know. I hope they don't expand it too quickly. Immigration lawyer Mark Hulty said that if the government plans to expand the program, it should simplify the application process. It was an absolute disaster, Hulty said, describing his efforts to help clients navigate their applications. Encountering a glitch in the online portal that wouldn't allow the applicant to advance further in the application process. He criticized the government for not providing clear instructions ahead of the portal opening. The application was not only a complete mystery to people before they started to log in, but as soon as they started to fill in the information, there was one section that tripped up everyone, he said. It didn't allow people to enter the information correctly. Hulty said that a number of his clients abandoned their applications due to the burdensome process. People were left out in the dark to a large extent. So that's kind of crazy, right? How many super interested and talented people abandoned their applications because the portal sucked, right? It's kind of a shame to hear. But I guess not a huge surprise. So anyways, that was so stupid. Opens on a Sunday. I know. I mean, that makes no sense to me. I'd be curious to hear from somebody about why they would open any program on a Sunday. Again, you're just kind of, I guess, slapping the professionals in the face a little bit, but maybe they just don't really care about that. People were actually having problems finding representation for this program because of the launch date alone. I mean, it makes sense, right? It's in the summer on a Sunday too, right? So especially in Canada, this is where people like to travel. They like to go on vacation. They might be out of the country. They might be taking a few weeks off of work. And you launch a new program on a Sunday, right, in the middle of the summer. So anyways, hopefully they adjust based on how this went. I still think before expanding this whatsoever, they should wait and see how it goes. How many get approved? How many actually come to Canada? Like, if I had to bet, I bet you more than half of these 10,000 people either never come to Canada or never work for a Canadian company. Will we ever have this data? I have no idea, right? Will it even be trackable? Well, I guess maybe it could down the road. But if I was a betting man, I would bet you that at least over half of these people either never come to Canada and or never work for a Canadian company. Because if you're like a senior developer, you're living in the U.S., you went there, you got your master's, now you're working for whatever, Facebook, or some like solid software company. You're probably making like 3, 4, 5, 600K USD. Maybe working remote, maybe it's like hybrid, right? You got to go into the office a little bit here and there. Assuming you haven't lost your job, like why would you move to Canada, potentially give up hundreds of thousands in salary to go have to spend more money to buy a house? And then if you did decide to do that, you would certainly try to keep your job, right? You would try to maintain that remote work and continue to collect that USD check and just not bother working for a Canadian startup or Canadian tech company, which was the purpose of this to begin with. Anyways, great session today, Josh, but gotta go. All the best, my friend. Justin, thanks very much for tuning in. Thanks for the great input, and we'll hopefully see you in the next one. Those are kind of the key topics I wanted to discuss today. Unless anybody has any other questions, comments, topics that they wanted my input on or wanted to share their own input. Really quickly on the Visto side, we're working hard at automating the entire LMIA process. So as many of you know, Visto is an immigration platform for Canadian immigration professionals, right? Canadian immigration lawyers, consultants, law firms, study abroad agencies. We help you prep applications faster than ever before. We have some pretty cool tools and AI and automation and form filling and all that stuff. What we're working on right now is automating the LMIA process. So if you are an immigration firm, you do a lot of LMIAs for Canadian companies. We're working on building that into Visto as well. So you can invite your corporate clients, manage them, gather all their documents, information, track the different work permits, all that kind of stuff. So we're really excited about that. Stay tuned with updates in the future. Other than that's all I had planned for today. If you did tune in later on, the recording of this will stay live on LinkedIn. So make sure to keep an eye out for that. If you want to watch from the beginning, or you missed one of the earlier segments, or you have a family or friend that you think might find this interesting, you can send them the link once I finish the recording. I'm also going to upload this video on our YouTube channel. So I will link that in the comments as well, because again, if you want to watch the whole recording, you can check it out on our YouTube channel. The link is now in the comments. So anyways, that is it for me. Once again, thanks everybody for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you got some value out of it. Any comments, questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. We'll be live again in 2 weeks. It will be on Friday. So normally I do this every second Friday. I'll be out of the country tomorrow. So the next Visto Live will be on Friday, August the 4th. Same time, noon, 12 p.m. Eastern. Gaurav says, sounds like a good platform. Will this be a membership? Yeah, Gaurav, so it's just a monthly subscription. If you want, Gaurav, feel free to shoot me a message. Our pricing is on the website, right? So you can just check out visto.ai is the website. You can learn more about it there. You can even book in a demo with me, Gaurav, if you're interested, and I can take you through the app, show you all the key features, all that fun stuff. So if you're interested in that, definitely take a look or reach out individually. Thank you again, everybody, for tuning in. I will see you in 2 weeks and 1 day live on LinkedIn. Have a great rest of your Thursday. Have a great rest of the week, and I will see you in the next video. Take care, everybody.